In 1947, the year began like any other in the Valsequillo Basin, a sprawling volcanic valley southeast of Mexico City. But what emerged from beneath tons of sediment that spring would challenge everything archaeologists thought they knew about human arrival in the Americas. When construction workers broke ground for a new irrigation system near Puebla, their excavators struck something unexpected. Embedded in rock layers dating back over 250,000 years were tools, not primitive stones shaped by nature, but deliberately carved implements showing unmistakable signs of human craftsmanship. The problem was stark and unavoidable. According to every established timeline, humans weren't supposed to exist in the Americas until roughly 13,000 years ago. The discovery didn't just contradict accepted history, it shattered it completely. The Valsequillo findings were just the beginning. Within the same geological strata, researchers uncovered something even more perplexing. Carved bones depicting extinct megafauna, mastodons, giant sloths, and saber-toothed cats, rendered in detail that suggested direct observation. These weren't fossils that ancient peoples stumbled upon millennia later. The artwork showed animals in motion, hunting scenes, behavioral details only eyewitnesses could capture. The implications were staggering and immediate. Whoever carved these images had lived alongside creatures that vanished from Earth over 10,000 years ago. They had watched these giants move, hunt, and die. They had recorded what they saw with precision that modern paleontologists could verify against fossil evidence. Cynthia Irwin Williams, the American archaeologist who led the major excavations throughout the 1960s, documented over 2,000 artifacts from 4 distinct sites around the ancient lake bed. Stone scrapers, blades, and projectile points emerged from volcanic ash layers that geologists confirmed were deposited during the Sangamonian interglacial period, a warm phase between ice ages spanning from 80,000 to 220,000 years ago. If the dating was accurate, and multiple independent tests suggested it was, then humans were shaping tools in Mexico while Neanderthals still roamed Europe, and modern Homo sapiens were only just beginning to emerge in Africa. The chronology made no sense according to any existing model of human migration. The Bering Strait land bridge theory, the absolute foundation of American prehistory, taught in every textbook, suggested migration occurred around 15,000 years ago when massive ice sheets retreated and created a pathway from Siberia to Alaska. Yet here were tools potentially predating that event by 200,000 years. The gap wasn't a minor discrepancy that could be explained away with revised carbon dating or calibration errors. This was a chasm that swallowed entire epochs of human history. Either the dating was catastrophically, impossibly wrong across multiple independent methodologies, or human history in the Americas needed complete rewriting from the ground up. Mainstream archaeology responded with intense skepticism, bordering on outright rejection. Critics argued the artifacts must have been displaced, pushed down into older layers by natural processes like bioturbation, where burrowing animals mix soil strata, or fluvial erosion, where water movements shuffle geological layers across millennia. Others suggested the bones were carved much later by people who found ancient fossils and decorated them, creating a false association between human activity and extinct species. Some dismissed the entire site as contaminated, arguing that modern disturbance from construction work had introduced recent artifacts into ancient sediments. The scientific community demanded extraordinary evidence for such extraordinary claims, and many felt Valsequillo fell short of that threshold. But the Valsequillo sites weren't isolated anomalies that could be written off as contamination or misinterpretation. Similar discoveries kept surfacing across Mexico, each one defying conventional timelines and forcing uncomfortable questions about what really happened in the deep American past. In the decades following Valsequillo, Mexico continued yielding discoveries that refused to conform to established narratives. In 1959, near the small town of Teotihuacan, just a few kilometers from the original Valsequillo sites, excavators uncovered a butchering station that would become one of the most controversial archaeological sites in the Western Hemisphere. The evidence was unambiguous. Stone tools lay scattered among the fractured bones of extinct animals, clear signs of systematic processing for meat and marrow. But when geologists dated the surrounding volcanic deposits using uranium-thorium analysis, the results sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The site was at least 250,000 years old, possibly older. Some estimates push the date back to 370,000 years, a timeline so ancient it placed human activity in Mexico before anatomically modern humans even existed. The Teotihuacan findings triggered fierce academic warfare. In 1981, Virginia Steen McIntyre, one of the geologists who conducted the dating analysis, was effectively ostracized from her profession for refusing to retract her findings. Universities rejected her papers. Colleagues stopped returning her calls. Her career stalled because the numbers she produced were simply too disruptive to the established model. The message was clear: some discoveries were too inconvenient to accept, regardless of the evidence supporting them. Yet the physical artifacts remained stubbornly real, refusing to disappear despite professional pressure and academic politics. Further south, in the state of Puebla, another enigma emerged from the earth in the form of the Acambaro figures. Between 1944 and 1952, a local merchant named Waldemar Julsrud excavated over 33,000 clay figurines from the hillsides near Acambaro. The collection was vast and bizarre, detailed representations of humans from various cultures, musical instruments, tools, everyday objects, and something that stopped researchers cold. Hundreds of the figurines depicted dinosaurs. Not vague dragon-like creatures that could be dismissed as mythological imagination, but specific, anatomically detailed representations of species like Brachiosaurus, Stegosaurus, and Pteranodon. The craftsmanship was remarkable, showing understanding of posture, body proportion, and physical features that modern science only confirmed through fossil reconstruction in the 20th century. Skeptics immediately cried hoax, arguing Julsrud had commissioned local artisans to create the pieces, perhaps inspired by popular dinosaur imagery from films and books. The problem with this explanation was timing and scope. Many of the figurines depicted species that weren't widely known or accurately reconstructed until decades after their excavation. The sheer volume of pieces, over 33,000 individual objects, would have required an industrial forgery operation involving dozens of artisans working full-time for years. Thermoluminescence dating conducted on select samples in the 1970s suggested the clay was fired between 2,500 and 4,000 years ago, long before modern paleontology existed. If authentic, the implications were staggering. Ancient Mesoamerican peoples had somehow documented creatures that vanished 65 million years before humans supposedly evolved. The mainstream explanation settled on elaborated mythology. Perhaps ancient cultures discovered dinosaur fossils, and like the ancient Greeks who created the Cyclops myth from elephant skulls, constructed their own interpretations of what they found. But this theory struggled against the specificity of the Acambaro representations. These weren't generic monsters. They showed anatomical details like skin textures, tail positions, and limb structures that fossil bones alone couldn't reveal. Some figurines depicted dinosaurs with what appeared to be ceremonial decorations or in interaction with humans, suggesting cultural familiarity rather than paleontological speculation. Then there was the matter of the Ica stones from Peru, though Mexican sites produced similar engraved artifacts. Thousands of andesite stones bearing intricate carvings of humans alongside dinosaurs, advanced surgical procedures, and astronomical charts surfaced throughout the 1960s and 1970s. While Peru received most of the attention, less publicized discoveries in Oaxaca and Chiapas revealed comparable carved stones depicting impossible chronologies. The consistent theme across these diverse sites was uncomfortable. Ancient American cultures seemed to preserve knowledge of creatures and technologies they shouldn't have possessed. None of these discoveries fit the narrative of human migration taught in schools. The Clovis first model, which dominated American archaeology for most of the 20th century, held that the first Americans crossed the Bering Land Bridge approximately 13,000 years ago, spreading rapidly southward and giving rise to all indigenous American cultures. By this timeline, sophisticated civilizations like the Maya, Aztec, and Inca represented the pinnacle of thousands of years of gradual development from those first Siberian migrants. But the physical evidence kept contradicting this neat progression, suggesting something far more complex and far older had transpired in the Americas. The architectural evidence proved even more challenging to conventional timelines than scattered artifacts and carved figurines. Deep in the jungles of Chiapas, near the Guatemala border, stand the ruins of Palenque, a Maya city that flourished between 226 and 799 CE, according to standard chronology. Yet certain structures within the complex display construction techniques and astronomical alignments that suggest knowledge far beyond what the Maya were supposed to possess during that era. The Temple of Inscriptions, built as a funerary monument for the ruler Kinich Janab Pakal, contains a stone slab that has sparked decades of controversy. Carved into the limestone is an image showing Pakal in what mainstream archaeology describes as his descent into the underworld, surrounded by traditional Maya cosmological symbols. But to engineers and aerospace specialists who examined the carving without archaeological preconceptions, the image bore striking resemblance to a person operating complex machinery, possibly a vehicle or control apparatus. The figure appears seated in a reclined position, hands manipulating what could be interpreted as controls, surrounded by mechanical-looking components and what resembles exhaust or propulsion flames. The controversy isn't whether the Maya carved the image, but what they were actually depicting based on observation or inherited knowledge. The precision of Palenque's astronomical alignments adds another layer of mystery. The site's structures track celestial events with accuracy that required sophisticated mathematical understanding and multi-generational observation. The palace complex aligns perfectly with the winter solstice sunset. The Temple of the Sun marks the summer solstice with equal precision. These aren't approximate orientations that could result from trial and error. They represent deliberate engineering based on comprehensive astronomical knowledge. The Maya long count calendar, which tracks time in cycles spanning over 5,000 years, demonstrates mathematical sophistication that rivals modern computational systems. The calendar's starting point, usually translated as August 11, 3114 BCE, raises its own questions. Why did the Maya choose that specific date as the beginning of the current world age? What historical or cosmic event did it commemorate? No written records explain the choice, suggesting the knowledge was inherited from an earlier tradition now lost. But Palenque is merely one example among dozens. At Teotihuacan, the massive complex near modern Mexico City, the scale and precision of construction defies explanations based on the technology supposedly available to its builders. The Pyramid of the Sun, one of the largest structures in the ancient Americas, contains over 1 million cubic meters of material. The entire site was built according to a master plan that incorporated advanced geometry, astronomical alignments, and a grid system that modern urban planners struggle to replicate without computer assistance. Mica, a mineral with unique thermal and electrical properties, was incorporated into several structures in sheets up to 90 square feet. The nearest source for mica of that quality and quantity lies over 2,000 miles away in Brazil. Why transport such massive quantities of a material that serves no obvious decorative or structural purpose? Modern applications of mica include electrical insulation, heat shielding, and capacitors in electronic devices. What were the builders of Teotihuacan using it for in structures built nearly 2,000 years ago? The city's layout itself presents mathematical puzzles that suggest advanced planning. The Avenue of the Dead, the main thoroughfare running through Teotihuacan, aligns 15.5 degrees east of true north, precisely matching the alignment needed to track certain stellar positions. The distance between major structures follows a consistent mathematical ratio that appears throughout the complex. The Pyramid of the Sun's base dimensions, 738 feet per side, divided by its height of 246 feet, produces a ratio remarkably close to pi. This could be coincidence, but when the same mathematical relationships appear repeatedly across different structures within the same site, coincidence becomes increasingly unlikely. Someone designing Teotihuacan possessed sophisticated mathematical and astronomical knowledge and deliberately encoded it into the architecture. Then there's the mystery of the site's abandonment. Around 750 CE, Teotihuacan's population of over 100,000 people simply left. There's no evidence of invasion, plague, or natural disaster forcing evacuation. The people dismantled certain structures, carefully burned specific buildings while leaving others intact, and departed in what appears to have been organized, deliberate abandonment. They took their knowledge with them, leaving no written records explaining who they were, where they came from, or why they left. The Aztecs, who arrived centuries later, found the ruins and named the place Teotihuacan, meaning the place where the gods were created, because they couldn't imagine humans building something so monumental. Even the Aztecs, master builders themselves, looked at Teotihuacan and saw something beyond human capability as they understood it. Underground, Mexico conceals even stranger architectural achievements. The cave systems beneath the Yucatan Peninsula contain structures that challenge our understanding of both geology and human capability. At Lolten Cave in Yucatan, paintings depicting extinct megafauna cover walls deep within passages that natural erosion sealed off thousands of years ago. The artwork shows mastodons, giant sloths, and other Pleistocene animals rendered with detail, suggesting direct observation. But accessing these deep chambers would have required navigating pitch-black passages, crossing underground rivers, and descending vertical shafts without modern lighting or climbing equipment. What drove ancient peoples to venture so far underground and create art in spaces they could barely see, let alone work in comfortably? The cenotes, natural sinkholes formed by limestone collapse, served as both water sources and sacred sites for Maya civilization. But some cenotes contain architectural modifications that predate Maya culture by thousands of years. Stone platforms built at precise depths, carved channels directing water flow, and stepped access ways descending hundreds of feet into flooded chambers all suggest sophisticated hydraulic engineering. The most puzzling aspect is depth. Many of these modifications exist below current water tables, meaning they were constructed when sea levels were significantly lower, placing their creation at least 10,000 years ago, possibly much earlier. Who built them, and how did they possess engineering knowledge that wouldn't be rediscovered until modern times? The pattern emerging from Mexico's archaeological record points toward a conclusion that mainstream science has been reluctant to embrace. Human presence in the Americas extends far deeper into prehistory than conventional models allow, and the technological sophistication of ancient cultures may have been vastly underestimated. The evidence doesn't fit neatly into the narrative of gradual development from primitive hunter-gatherers to advanced civilizations. Instead, it suggests cycles of knowledge, periods of remarkable achievement followed by collapse and loss, with later cultures building literally and figuratively on foundations they no longer fully understood. Consider the metallurgical evidence. In various sites across Mexico, archaeologists have recovered copper bells, gold ornaments, and bronze tools that display manufacturing techniques not supposed to exist in pre-Columbian America. The bronze pieces are particularly puzzling because bronze requires deliberately alloying copper with tin, a process demanding high-temperature furnaces and metallurgical knowledge that supposedly arrived only with European contact. Yet, radiocarbon dating of organic materials found alongside these artifacts consistently produces dates centuries or even millennia before Columbus. The standard explanation involves contamination or misdating, but as more examples surface, that explanation grows increasingly strained. Some pieces show evidence of cold hammering and annealing, techniques that require understanding of metal crystalline structure and thermal properties. This isn't accidental discovery. It represents systematic metallurgical knowledge applied with precision. The written records that do survive from ancient Mexico present their own mysteries. The Dresden Codex, one of only 4 Maya books to escape Spanish destruction, contains astronomical tables tracking Venus with accuracy not matched in Europe until the 19th century. The Codex calculates the synodic period of Venus as 583.92 days, compared to the modern measurement of 583.93 days. That level of precision required centuries of continuous observation and mathematical refinement. But the Dresden Codex is a copy, possibly of a copy, of much older source material now lost. How many generations of astronomical observation preceded the version that survived? What other knowledge existed in the thousands of codices that Bishop Diego de Landa ordered burned in 1562, destroying in a single day what represented millennia of accumulated learning? The Aztec sunstone, often called the Aztec calendar, weighs over 24 tons and displays cosmological knowledge encoded in concentric circles of symbols. At its center sits Tonatiuh, the sun god, surrounded by representations of the 4 previous world ages, each ending in catastrophic destruction. Modern scholars interpret this as mythology, But what if it represents historical memory of actual catastrophic events? The geological record confirms multiple extinction-level events over the past 500,000 years. Volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, rapid climate shifts. Ancient cultures worldwide preserve flood myths, stories of fire from the sky, and tales of previous humanities destroyed by angry gods. Mexico's indigenous traditions are remarkably specific about these destructions, providing dates and descriptions that align suspiciously well with known geological upheavals. The sunstone might be less mythology and more historical record, preserved in symbolic form because literal description had been lost or forbidden. Then there's the question of cultural continuity and sudden appearance. The Olmec civilization, considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica, appears in the archaeological record around 1500 BCE, already fully formed, with sophisticated art, astronomy, writing, and urban planning. There's no clear developmental period, no obvious transition from simpler to more complex. They simply appear with colossal stone heads, weighing up to 50 tons, carved with such precision that modern sculptors struggle to replicate the work with contemporary tools. The heads depict individuals with distinctly African features, raising uncomfortable questions about transoceanic contact thousands of years before it was supposed to occur. Mainstream archaeology attributes the features to artistic style or genetic variation, but the specificity of the representations, including braided hair and what appear to be helmets or headdresses, unlike anything in American iconography, suggests the Olmecs either had contact with African peoples or were themselves migrants from across the Atlantic. The totality of evidence from Mexico paints a picture that doesn't match the comfortable narrative of isolated development and linear progress. Instead, it suggests something far more complex. Multiple waves of human presence spanning hundreds of thousands of years, periods of advanced knowledge followed by catastrophic loss, cultural inheritance from predecessors so ancient their origins were already mythological, and possible contact with other continents long before recorded history. The Valsequillo tools, the Hueyatlaco butchering site, the Acambaro figurines, the architectural precision of Teotihuacan and Palenque, the metallurgical anomalies, the astronomical sophistication of the Maya, and the sudden appearance of fully formed civilizations like the Olmec all point in the same direction, toward a past far richer and stranger than textbooks acknowledge. What makes Mexico's archaeological mysteries particularly significant is their sheer concentration. While isolated anomalies exist worldwide, Mexico presents a density of contradictory evidence that becomes difficult to dismiss as misinterpretation or fraud. When one site produces controversial findings, skepticism is warranted. When dozens of sites across thousands of square miles and spanning different time periods all contradict the same established timeline, the problem shifts from questionable evidence to questionable theory. The real question isn't whether these discoveries are authentic. Most have been verified by multiple independent researchers using different methodologies. The question is what they mean. Do they represent contaminated sites, misdated artifacts, and elaborate hoaxes as skeptics maintain? Or do they point toward a fundamentally different understanding of human history in the Americas, one that acknowledges earlier presence, greater sophistication, and knowledge systems that rose and fell long before our current civilizations emerged? The evidence exists. It sits in museums, lies buried in restricted sites, and waits in jungles not yet explored. What doesn't fit any history book isn't the artifacts themselves, but our willingness to accept what they're telling us about a past we thought we understood.